How are you?
Good.
Oh,
You, Jacques?
pretty good. I'm not gonna stay. I already got a job, so I don't need to get a job in the tech industry anymore. I already got one, but I wanted to be there to thank you for doing this. It's really appreciated. So I think it should be very good for the students. So I'll sign off. I just wanted to come and say hello and thank you. Have fun.
Thanks, Jacques. Yep.
All right, I'm going to pin myself here for a moment. So I'll just give a couple more minutes as more students join here, and then we can go ahead and get started. All right, since it's 4:32, we can go ahead and jump on in. And as everyone else joins, we can add them in. So just introduce myself. Hi, I am Ellen Gregoire. I'm going to be moderating this session. I am the Outreach and Communications Manager for the Economics Department. And I, as part of that role, run our mentorship program, which this is being put on by. So thank you to our three panelists who are all mentors and also all members of our visiting committee, which is our alumni board. So these guys work extra hard for our department. So thank you guys for that. And I'm going to introduce them really quickly and then have them introduce themselves before we jump right into questions here. So first of all, our first panelist is Adley Bowden. He received his BA from our department in 2017, and he is now the Vice President of Data and Research at Pitchbook. Next, we have Cary Oshima. Cary earned his BA from our department in 1990, and most recently, Cary was the Vice President of Digital Health at Cognizant. And then last, we have Nat Sahlstrom. Nat received his BS from our department in 2006. He then went on to earn his MBA from the Foster School of Business and is now the Director of Amazon Energy at Amazon Web Services. So welcome, everyone. Adley, do you want to start us off and introduce yourselves?
Certainly. Thanks, Ellen. Name's Adley, as Ellen mentioned. So for those of you not familiar with Pitchbook, we're located in Seattle. We're headquartered, but we're global. And we focus on kind of researching the private markets and then providing that data through a software as a service type platform to private equity, venture capital, investment banks, corporations, sort of a huge landscape of firms. And I've been with Pitchbook now for about 13 years, been across the business on the marketing side, on the product side, sales, research, and data collection as well. So it can help speak to any of the kind of tech aspects that now layer in across all those different functions within the business. Pass it over to Cary.
Yeah, thanks, Adley. Hey, everyone. Again, my name's Cary Oshima. I see some familiar names and faces on here, but look forward to chatting with you guys on Tech Career. So my background, besides obviously being a UW and econ grad, I have worked in entirely in the technology business and consulting industry. So unlike Nat and Adley, who work for tech companies directly, my companies or companies I work for work a lot with many industries, but my focus has been predominantly with tech industry companies. So I spent 18 years with Accenture, and then the last 10 years with Cognizant. And these are two, both of them are two very large global business and technology consultancies. Amongst my UW connections, as we all three of us share a common connection to as Visi committee members, I'm currently serving as the chair. I also, hearkening back to my UW days, I was a member of the EUB, which I know still exists today. When I was an EUB member, it was the second year of its existence. So that kind of dates me a little bit, but I also had a lot of fun while I was a student with activities, mostly in the music department. I was a member of the marching band, and I did a lot of other jazz band, concert band, et cetera. So music was sort of my unofficial minor to an economics major. So, so look forward to talking to you guys. And I'll pass it to Nat.
Thanks, Cary. I was the EUB member too. I smile because I have really fond memories of being on the economics undergraduate board. So nice shout out to that. My name's Nat Sahlstrom, everyone. I've been at Amazon Web Services now for just about 10 years. And I'm going to head off a little bit around background to one of the questions I saw presented to the panel, which is, what are experiences and backgrounds that you need in technology? And one of the things that I find really interesting about the technology space, it's not super track dependent. And that fit my lifestyle perfectly, because while I graduated from UW in 2006 with my undergraduate, I think I was like 25 years old at the time, because I had spent post high school playing in punk rock bands and touring and putting out records. And while I was on tour on multiple US tours with a band that was pretty successful, I'd be reading Milton Friedman or books like that. And I was really into economics, and I was like, I want to go to school. And the really cool thing I think about a lot of tech firms is they're a lot more open to different career tracks and backgrounds. Amazon in particular has a cultural cue that we like being peculiar. So you'll find people who have all sorts of different experiences. They just didn't go from X to Y to Z. And that's one of the really interesting things that I found around career arcs in technology. So I come from a very different non-traditional background, and here I am in tech today.
Thanks. So I'm going to jump right in and ask the questions that you guys have submitted through your RSVPs. Thank you to the students who submitted questions. And then once we get through this list of questions at the end, we'll be able to open it up to whatever other questions you guys have. So I'm just going to jump right in for my three panelists. Whoever wants to answer it, go ahead. Not all three of you need to answer it if you don't want to for every question, by the way. All right, so first question, what is the minimum requirement of skill sets one would need to work in the tech industry? Nat, you kind of spoke to this already a little bit.
Yeah, I'll follow on Nat's answer. I mean, I think in reality it is what he said. I mean, it's kind of zero. It depends on where. I mean, the tech industry now is so massive. It's not just all, computer science majors doing development work. Within tech, there's marketing, there's sales, there's business analytics, all sorts of stuff like that. So I think the minimum that you need is more around comfort, experience in a workplace, and knowing that really what business is problem solving. I think that's where econ sets people up really well, is how to learn and how to solve problems and bring a framework to it. So if you're just trying to go work for a tech company, Microsoft and Amazon, or a small startup, you don't need to have computer science. Just don't apply for the computer science roles. Look for those other things around the side. My 2 cents.
And I'd just add that I completely agree. And I think that when you think about it, tech companies, you think of, just pick on Microsoft, since I worked a lot with them, you think of them, oh, they make great software, so you must need just software. They're a massive company. They need people that run the business, that do marketing, that do the back office work, that do, a lot of the sales activity. So just like any other company in a major industry, they have to have all these things to run as an organization. So when you think about what is a economics major do, why would an economics major be a good background for a tech company? You can really apply the same thinking as why would it be for any other industry. I think the thing that makes tech particularly interesting, and I have a, because I'm in a consulting role, I feel like talk to people who are having econ majors. One of the things I think about with tech is that you're working a lot with data, but there's so many different ways you can work with data. Of course, you can be a data scientist, any real competent way, but I also work with data, and I work with data when it comes to, and a lot of my responsibilities have been around business development, around sales opportunities to help their business. we're working often with data and information. We're analyzing it. I have teams of people that analyze it, and they're not necessarily people that are, super techie. They're just people that can work with data, draw inference from it, make decisions. And that is a lot of what the econ background provides, is people who have that way of thinking that you can problem solve and become great at, addressing with the data that you have available, making some recommendations and decisions. And I think that's tremendous background for tech companies.
I'll add one quick point to Cary had, which is, I think, particularly germane to undergraduates.
Uh-oh.
The problem solving that you're going to be having in the tech space, you should be really comfortable with ambiguity. And I think that's really frustrating as a student, because I remember being very frustrated when I had like an exam and the question wasn't what I was looking, it wasn't the problem sets where I had to just like take derivatives or solve for the equilibrium. And it was like, I was like, this isn't fair. Like, there isn't like a scripted answer. I didn't study for this. Well, that's reality in the tech space. Oftentimes there's a huge degree of ambiguity in what the answer is. You may go in completely different directions. So I think to be successful in that space, you have to be comfortable with ambiguity, and then bringing all those skills that Adley and Cary were talking about to bear.
Thank you. So this actually rolls right into it. From an undergrad perspective, what key things would you be looking for in an entry-level role? What skills, technologies, and are in most demand right now in your fields? Any advice on career advancement to avoid stagnation? So, Cary, also what you were saying with the different titles looking for economic students.
I think the cover the ambiguity is one. It's hard. That doesn't show up in job postings. Well, that's a reality of once you get the job, that's going to be what you're landing with. So know that. And I think in interviews, it's good to be able to demonstrate and talk about that, because a lot of times it's not sitting on the job posting, but it's something that the hiring manager knows that they're going to have to throw this person into likely. So I'd say that's a little secret tip there from Nat. In terms of specifics, Excel is a good one. And I think that can be a little tough for econ students versus business school students, where it's not as baked into the curriculum. Most jobs you're not using R in reality, which, you might be a little more familiar with. There's stats packages and stuff like that. So I think it's business analyst, which is Excel, and then maybe some comfort with something like a Tableau or a Microsoft BI, or sort of a visualization layer on top of that. Your first job is probably one where you're kind of pulling data for somebody and you're packaging it up for them. That's sort of your generic, I would say, entry-level job in the tech world that you as an econ student is probably going to land in. So I would brush up on Excel, know how to do pivot tables, know how to do charting, and kind of what I'd call sort of 200-300 level type stuff. But you don't need to go crazy fancy. You don't need to worry about R or sorry, not R, but macros and things like that. Those are nice to haves, not needs. Other nice to have: SQL, Python, some basic kind of database coding type languages. But honestly, those are pretty easy to pick up. And the real challenge in learning those is actually the database structure that you're layering all those queries on top of. So you could go do Code Academy for SQL and Python and get some base skills. But the reality is you're going to need to get into that company and get into the database, and then it'll actually, all really, really come together. So those would be some of the key things I would list.
I can't overemphasize that enough, because I remember torturing myself to learn eViews for my econometrics class, and then never seen it ever again, and getting into my first internship in the office, and I didn't even know how to use Excel or Outlook. Like, it's like trying to be like a carpenter and know how to build like a really exotic electrical wiring system, but not knowing how to use a hammer to pound a nail. That's kind of like the technical skill set. So definitely know your office suite. It seems silly, but I didn't know it all, and I felt just like a total, oh my gosh.
All right. What does a typical workday look like? What career steps would you recommend to students who want to reach your specific career or a career path?
So I'll start, though I understand it with my perspective, it's in the tech consulting area, but I think with the typical day, and one thing that I found with both Accenture and Cognizant is that as an entry-level person, oftentimes your education and training don't stop just when you graduate. In fact, when I was with Accenture, I went right into about a month and a half of heavily training focus, and so they basically teach you how to become a consultant in a sense. And in this case, it's part tech. So, but a lot of it is also how to work together as a team. And I know a lot of you are in team projects and things for class, but it's a little bit different when you're working in a professional environment in terms of the pervasiveness of your working together. You might be working, 8 to 10 hours a day together with your team for extended period of time. So there's a lot of focus on, trying to get you situated. But once you get beyond that, a lot of work that I see more entry-level folks getting engaged in the tech consulting area has been joining up and working on proposals and opportunities that or our organization may have working with our tech clients, and oftentimes, and some of the things that Nat was talking about, you need those office skills. We certainly do, because you're putting PowerPoint decks together, or you're putting together some of the financial sheets that are needed to determine things like pricing, margin, and other financial type terms that are important for when you try to put together, a deal for doing some work for a customer. So oftentimes I do feel like as an entry level, you're still learning, but then you're very rapidly being put into situations where you're contributing to parts of the work itself, but that has other people engaged as well. So you're not too far, into the place where you got to do everything by yourself and got to figure it out. You're still getting support along the way.
Yeah, I would say as far as a typical day, I think it really does vary. Every company has a different culture around what that typical day looks like, when it starts, when it ends. If it ends, I think especially for junior employees, sometimes your days can be a little bit longer and sort of at the needs of the business or the team that you're on, whether it's emails and meetings or calls or different stuff. So it's pretty role, pretty company dependent as to what a normal day looks like, but it's a mix of emails and Zoom calls to be more or less right now. And in terms of career-wise and stagnation, I think it's just volunteer for opportunities. That would be, one little piece. As those come up, raise your hand, and you'll never know what comes from them.
I would double down on that, which is you guys are all economists. You understand what signaling is. Signaling isn't just raising your hand, but it's by showing interest. So like a manager may have a project in mind that would be perfect for you, and they're not sure if this person wanted to get involved. But if you're engaged, if you're in a meeting and it even doesn't have anything to do with you, but you're actively listening, and people can tell. I mean, you guys know when you're in class and someone's just zoning out on their phone and they're not actively listening or actively engaged, people can pick up on that. So managers may be like, hey, that person did really good on this thing. And I see them that they're always really actively engaged and they're trying to learn, even if they're being quiet. I can tell. That sends a signal to them like, hey, let's go stretch this person. Let's go challenge that person. And I think that's something that we all struggle with, especially in the Zoom environment of like, oh man, it's so easy to this doesn't involve me. I'm going to go work on something else or multitask. It's really important to be present and engaged. And I think you guys have already self-selected just by being here that you want to volunteer and stretch yourself and be challenged. So I would add that when you think about what does your day in a life look like, be present, always be learning, always be engaged.
What classes would you guys suggest taking outside of the economics major?
I will jump in here first. I would highly emphasize anything to do with business writing. The number one thing I see out of undergraduates and MBAs, doesn't matter if they're coming from Harvard or UW, doesn't matter, writing, people are just so poorly equipped for business writing, and not rhetorical flourish like you get in the English 101, just straight active voice business writing. If you can find a business writing class, man, that'll be a competitive advantage.
Go for it, Cary.
Yeah, no, I would echo that, and I think the things that again come to mind are, as you're recognizing that there's different ways to communicate. The written word is, and I hate to say this, a lot of this is I pin on Microsoft and PowerPoint is, you have these slides that you'll see that you can't actually determine what the message is, and now it's how important it is to have that written things backed up to the point where a lot of organizations, I think Amazon, I mean Nat knows this better than anyone else, their reputation is they issue with PowerPoint is everything's written more in the spoken word. So I think that's very important. One other that I would just throw in is, I think, and the Arts and Sciences School is very strongly supportive of this. It's about having a multidisciplinary background, right? So I would just encourage just being able to take a mix of things that are outside of your major that sort of help you become a more well-rounded person. Because when it comes to it, you have your core skills and things that you focus on in your major, but sometimes it's those things that are outside, and some of that could be in the natural sciences area or other things that sort of come into play, and you just would be surprised, how that might come in. And again, referring to consulting as an example, we work with all industries. So in some cases, your background that you have in some of your classes that might be in other industries can be very helpful, even though you're not majoring in it.
I'm going to double down on Nat's business writing. And I think I took one, if not two of those, and definitely some of the more practical ones I took. So I know as foster students, you can take certain ones over at the business school. And if you take a base and really like the professor, they'll sometimes let you add in to maybe their 200 or 300 level course, assuming you show up well in that base level course. So that's what I did, and it worked quite well. Unfortunately, the professor is not there anymore. So I'd recommend that. Other courses, I think stats is required for the major, but if there's a business stats or another stats course, I think I would recommend doing that. This world is increasingly run by statistical ranges versus other decision-making tools. And then totally echo the well-rounding. I mean, both for career, then also just for like interest. One of the most interesting classes I took was geography of food. History design was a good one, and some of the times I got involved in product and knowing some of those things. So, I mean, you can pick random classes and you'll be surprised. They'll show up at different points in your career.
How does econometrics play a role in tech?
I don't know how much it does. Maybe in certain kind of, data science areas within tech and some of the kind of more AI, natural language processing type stuff, which is honestly well outside of my my sphere of knowledge. But in regular kind of business in tech, I haven't seen it yet in my career.
Yeah, I'll add UW. Actually, Eric Zivitz is actually at Amazon right now, who's a econ professor, and I've talked with him and some of the folks on his team a few times in my time there. And I work with Amazon has hired a lot of economists over the last 5+ years, but we don't go look at heteroscedasticity in their models or dummy variables. We go in and talk about the results of their statistical studies. I've never even seen the word econometrics I've very rarely seen like a p-value or any of the stuff that we all struggle so hard to go through in our econometric theory classes, but they're used. But it's more of when I go through it at Amazon, it's they're trying to justify a business decision or a pricing strategy. Or recently I worked with some economists on what we think the price of carbon offsets are going to be, because I'm working on some carbon offset projects with some companies, and we're trying to figure out what is the right price to pay. So we had the economist team go look at what do we think the price of carbon offsets are going to be if these different things happen. And they use statistical techniques, but I never even see them. They're not even in the appendix. They came in their model. So they're there, but there's no, who knows what blue is? Do you guys remember that? Best linear unbiased estimator? I still do, because I have like scars from it. It was so hard because I took that class in the summer at 8 a.m. and had to do proofs. And so, but I haven't touched it since.
Sounds like it may have left some scars for all of you, though.
In a very good way.
I mean,
I
as
took 311. I was going to say I took 311, and it was one of my lowest econ grades, and I don't remember much of it, and I'm not using it, so must hate to say badly of it. But I do think, in all seriousness, that I think a lot of where I could sort of draw some value from it is, you know, there's some thought processes that you could apply. I mean, I think the actual specifics from the coursework, but the mindset you go through, the detail that you have to make, the decision making once you've kind of gone through, you know, these different aspects, that's what's valuable. And again, it's all about, you know, moving to a decision and an outcome that that businesses want you to be able to facilitate. So I think it could be helpful there.
Yeah, and I don't want to feel like I'm piling on, like saying, hey, it was just like a really rough initiation process to economics. Not at all, because if you go, if you go ask like a team when you're, I've done this, are you confounding the impact of this variable with another variable? If you go tell that to an economist, they're going to be like, whoa, I got to be really careful. I can't be sloppy. And you can't underestimate the value of that, where you just have a little bit of rigor where you can peel back the layer and ask one or two critical questions. You don't have to be a complete expert, but you're showing to the team like, hey, I understand a little bit what you're doing here, and you can ask critical questions. And that has so many second and third order benefits around the work product and the level of rigor that goes into the analysis. And you learned that from your econometric theory class. You know how to ask the probing questions. You might not be a PhD econometrician, but you've got everyone on their toes thinking they need to bring their A game because there's someone who knows what autocorrelation is in the room, other than me or the econometrician.
Any other previous career pathways you considered? I think, Nat, you could probably speak to this. And what pivotal decisions helped you reach your current position?
Sure. I have a really apocryphal moment outside of Savory. Fahad Khalil, I was a really big fan of him. Personally, I think he's just so charismatic, and if you've had a class with him, he's a great professor, and I was a big fan of his, and I love just getting any time to talk with him. And I remember him telling me, because I was a senior at that point, and I'd never had a professional job ever, and I just got an internship, and I was so in love with economics. I was like, I want to go get my PhD in economics. That's exactly what I want to do. And Fahad told me in the spring, outside Savory Hall, don't do it. And I remember just being like almost like heartbroken, crushed. I was like, I love economics. I'm on the economics undergraduate board. And he was like, don't go do it. Like, really think about what you want to do. And that was such a powerful lesson in opportunity cost and really understanding what I want to do. And actually, when I joined the economics visiting committee, I had lunch with Fahad and Jacques, and I was like, thank you so much for saying that. That was some of the best advice you ever gave me. And at the time, I felt like you were throwing a bucket of cold water on me, but it was such wise advice. And it really kind of shifted my decision of like, you know, actually, I don't want to be a PhD economist. I love it, but I actually really like more of the economic way of thinking, rather than doing real analysis and trying to do the work that actually is involved with being an academic professor. I like being out in the real world now. And I would not have had a chance to learn that. And I would have paid a very high opportunity cost if I would have been going to graduate programs and doing all this stuff. And that seems so counterintuitive to hear from an economics professor when you're an economics student and you're really passionate about it. But it was just such an awesome pivot point for me. And I'm so grateful that he had the courage to tell me that at that point in time.
So I'm going to answer this question a little bit different way, or maybe a little bit down further path in my career. So as I mentioned in my intro, I worked actually for almost 30 years. I've worked for 2 companies. So I've stayed in one place for a long time. And I think as fresh undergrads or soon to be, you'll start down a path where you'll have your first organization company you work for, then you have your second and third. So there are different ways to kind of think about making those decisions. And so for me, career paths meant, finding great opportunities within a company itself to do many different things. And I had the good fortune, with Accenture, for instance, to have gone from a very struggling period where I was a COBOL programmer, and not a very good one at that, and turned that into something very different because they gave me opportunities to move into a specific track that moved well beyond the tech aspects, the programming aspects. And so I moved into design and into testing, and then eventually into more management and business development. And so, but many of my peers who maybe stayed at the company for less found great opportunities joining other companies. So as you think about sort of that way where you have career paths and how you set it, there's that opportunity to do that, by moving to different organizations within a company. But there's also, those that will find great opportunities by moving outside of the company to a different one. And so I'd invite you to think about that. In fact, one of my mentees, who will go unnamed, but I think she's on this call, I was asking questions about things that were like, what are you going to do a few years down the road? And it's like, well, wait a second, I'm still in haven't even started my first day at my company I joined. And, but I'd encourage you to sort of be thinking about that, because, you might find that after a decade has gone by, that, gosh, I wonder what life would have been like if I looked for, my career path, outside of the company I'm working for versus inside. So you want to always kind of make that sort of that judgment call, maybe an evaluation of where things are at, I'd say at least once a year, to help you think about your path forward.
Cary, that COBOL experience is probably back in demand. So even if it wasn't great, all those legacy systems need somebody to move data. I'll give 2 pieces of advice. One here is that careers are 30 plus years long. So your end destination, you're not going to arrive at in 2 to 5 years, which I find a lot of undergrads sort of get frustrated by. That within 6 to 9 months, they're not progressing, and they don't know how they're ever going to become, senior level something. But know that it's going to take years and years and decades. And that's by design. That's to help you gain the skills and experience you need. So be patient, but look for those opportunities. And I think where you'll find those opportunities is go towards growth. And already curious about tech is a good starting spot. There's a lot of growth in tech, but even if you end up at a non-tech company, there's some area of that company that's growing, and try to do everything you can to get to that corner of the business. Or even if the business is growing, try to figure out what part is growing the most. And it doesn't matter if you end up at the most junior role in that team. Where there's growth, truly, all boats do rise. You'll be in a good position. It solves a lot of problems, growth does. So that would be where I would try to navigate towards. And there's a lot of different, ways, but generally be paying attention at the business, quarterly all hands or updates or different finance things about, if they talk about some business unit that continues to perform well or is growing, try to see who's hiring. There's a lot of different ways to try to understand growth. You can look for, Gregoire maintains a list of, top local venture-backed companies. Go there, look for openings there. But I can't recommend enough trying to find some pocket of growth and just making that a kind of where you start your career.
How did you navigate getting internships and then jobs?
Personally, I not well, but it still worked out, which is something I'll tell people. I think, I had really one internship, and it was for a action sports video company, and I was calling accounts payable. So I was calling board shops and ski shops across the US, asking them to pay us for the videos that they had ordered. So what I actually learned in that was, kind of entry level sales skills and the ability to talk on the phone with people, but not a lot like business related. But it was a cool job. And then otherwise, I just worked retail. I just worked at the North Face in New Village for a good chunk of my college career. So, and it didn't matter. I got to a job. I had a little bit of work experience. I had a little bit of internship experience, and give me enough things to answer the questions in and get them to look at my resume. The job I found was on Husky Jobs. But these days, Indeed is a great spot. Like I said, go look at individual companies and just look at their job board and apply through there. There's a great UW network. Make use of it. If you're a undergrad and there's a company that you're interested in, you can find someone that went to UW Econ and just say, hey, I'm a UW Econ student. I applied, or I'm interested in applying. It looks like you work at this company. I'd be interested in just learning more different things. Like, people will help out. So it's a great time to try to use that. And the last thing I'd say is, just because you don't see econ major listed doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. A lot of people just aren't thinking econ from the recruiter perspective when they're picking, potential majors. It's not going to disqualify you, from a lot of stuff. So don't worry about not seeing that. You'll still have plenty of ability to get into the mix with that econ degree.
Yeah, Adley, I was going to say, I was trying to think about the last meeting we were both in. We talked about a synonym to like a type of a role. I think it was business analyst or functional analyst, I think, that we talked about. That's a great position for economics majors to apply for, because there's a very tight connection with an economics major. But I also, just to add some further comments to the question is, first off, with internships, so I don't know if most of you are juniors or seniors. So if you're seniors, it's too late. But if you're a junior, the thing to really think about for internships is, you got to be moving fast, first of all, because summer is almost upon us. But think about it, for a lot of companies, getting an internship is probably harder than getting a full-time position, because there aren't as many out there that they offer. But know that, the outcome of the internship is likely, unless you kind of mess up, is you're going to get a full-time job offer. So, so attack those, particularly for you juniors, attack them hard, because, and make sure you know the timeline for that. For the full-time positions, this was certainly the case back in my day, and I think in sort of checking in is still the same. There's a number, whether it's Husky Jobs or whatever the tools that you look for who's coming out early, because I just remember a lot of top companies would come within the first 2 weeks of school. Not everyone is settled in, and in terms of you all, looking for jobs, and so make sure that you know who's coming in early and get on those lists, because some of the top companies will already have come by for a number of folks who are, haven't really started, seriously looking, and there's an opportunity there.
I would add, be open to things. In particular, be open to unpaid internships. You guys recall, I was just telling you, hey, I was all gone. I don't need to get an internship or a job, because I'm just going to go get my PhD. And then, changed. And I had never had an internship, and I'd never worked in an office environment. I'd washed dishes, I'd rolled burritos, I'd roofed houses, I'd been a parking lot attendant, I'd been a rocker, I'd worked at a coffee shop, but I didn't know how to use Excel. And I just I got to get an internship. And the UW Econ department does a great job of putting internships out there, but it's a two-way street. You have to apply and be an active participant in that process. And I tried, I interviewed for a unpaid internship. And I was like, geez, how am I going to make this work with my time and not getting paid? Well, within 1 month, the CEO said, hey, I think we really got to pay this person. But I would have done that work for free because I learned so much information. It was I was getting more value out of the opportunity than I think that they were. And then they were like, hey, we should pay this person. That turned into a career and energy where I learned so much, and here I am today. So be really open-minded to things. You just don't know. Internships and where you guys are at now in your career is like the world's biggest option tree. There's just so many things that are out there for you right now. So don't feel like, oh, can't do that because it doesn't fit within my plan.
Yeah, one thing I'll catch is Cary said, I think it's too late if you're a senior. I think it's not too late, especially if you're just trying to figure out what you want to do. And there's many internships that'll take seniors. They're a little bit different, so you got to pay attention. Most of them are geared to take that sophomore, junior, and their summer programs and stuff like that. But you can certainly get a post-senior internship. And a lot of times they do that sort of intern to hire. And that's a really common way to bring new grads in. So it also doesn't lock you into that company. If the internship doesn't go well, you don't like the company or you don't like the group you landed in, you've built some experience and you can jump come the fall. People aren't going to look at that as sort of like, why is this person not continuing an internship with that company? I mean, you can speak to it and they'll be fine. So yeah, even if you're a senior, and I've seen people string together internships for a year almost out of college, just trying to better, understand different companies and opportunities as well. So it's totally normal for a while to do those, but it is hard. And I think it's gotten even harder just with the pandemic. I think a lot of people pulled back on internship programs because so much of that value is in person and culture and learning that I know at least we've pulled back on internship programs just because it's so much harder to onboard and to kind of use that finite time window to sort of get interns to a spot where they're sort of producing some level. So hopefully these things kind of open back up. You'll get the ability to get those programs running again. But yeah, I don't envy that search right now, but have faith, like you will find something. Businesses are all trying to hire.
One other thing I'll answer for this question is don't forget your network, because I think for all the jobs that you can find through Indeed or LinkedIn or Husky Jobs, there's so many other people that are in the same boat as you applying for the same jobs. And where your network comes in is, being able to get your resume actually reviewed by a live person. And sometimes, unfortunately, it just doesn't happen. And so, I've been working with my my mentorship people in the department and on this. And I think as, where you are, many times you think, oh, I don't really have a great network. I mean, I don't know a lot of people in the business industry, in the business world, but you end up realizing that you do. And I only have to go back to my own example that, mind you, this is before LinkedIn, 1990, there was no social networking and professional networks like that, tools. But I did have an older brother who's works for Boeing, and his boss's wife worked for Accenture. And he said, hey, why don't you look at Accenture? And I managed to get in part because I had an opportunity to talk to, his boss's wife, during an informational, and I'm pretty sure she helped me along in the process. So, it doesn't have to be somebody that you personally have met in the business context. It could be a family member, it could be a relative, a friend of a friend. But, those are very, very beneficial, if you can uncover those.
Just to highlight a tool that you guys all have access to, Husky Landing is a great way to search for people that are alumni and also current students that are potentially in your fields that you could then connect with, ask for informational interviews, that kind of thing. And also the Business Career Fair, the Foster School of Business puts on the giant career fair every fall. And like Cary said, it's early October. It's right when you guys are settling into campus. So a lot of students miss that. And they are always looking for economics students. The Foster people always call over to me and say, send over your economics students. We want to see them. And we never see enough of them. So those are two ways you can flex those opportunities. So jumping back into the questions, is graduate student school or a further certificate, or a further can't say that word, certification, a requirement if you want to pursue a data science career? And what can one do if they're only studying economics? You guys have kind of already talked to this, but if you had any other things to add there.
I would disagree. I think that there's nothing beats real world experience, especially with how rapidly evolving data science is and what a large umbrella term that is and how it's applied to business problems and how that's changing. I think, and also you guys are all undergraduates. None of you guys are data scientists. Maybe you are. Maybe you were a data scientist before you became an undergraduate. Or, but I'm gonna make a safe bet that most of you aren't data scientists. And going out and get some experience in the actual world about how data science as it's practiced today is applied to business problems is a really low cost way to learn if you actually want to do that, and what it means to have that as a career and how it might evolve and fit into your passions and your competencies and your interests. So that would be my recommendation. And then the other thing is, if you find out you really do like it, more and more employees are interested in continuous learning and development for their employees, and they might pay for it. So they'll say, hey, I really turned out I love data science, but I'm thinking about going to go get the certification program or go to graduate school. They'll say, please don't leave. We'll pay for it. Awesome. Then you can apply what you're learning in school to your job. And that stuff is negotiable oftentimes too. Your employers don't want to tell you that, but you can negotiate for those things.
Yeah, I think Nat nailed that one. And sort of one thing I'll add is there's a lot of online courses as well that I have had people on my teams take sort of along the side to gain certain kind of, base level data science skills, through Khan Academy or Coursera or some of the other, sort of open university courses. I think Harvard's got some. So there's ways too of sort of, there's an in-between now that you don't have to go, straight to grad, or you don't have to get that grad. You can pick up some of those skills, decide if you learn it, and then totally work with your employer, because someone showing up saying, I know your business, you know me, you're excited about me as an employee, and I want to gain these really valuable skills, like they're going to probably carry that conversation with you. So that'd be my piece.
All right, last question, and this was directed specifically towards Nat, but I'll ask it to all of you guys. What is the day-to-day work for an economic and financial policy analyst, and what excites you most about your current work position?
Day-to-day life, I think Adley did a pretty good job describing kind of what I would say like a financial or policy analyst role is, which is oftentimes, hey, here's these data sets that we got on this financial problem, or what do you think what's going to be the NPV of this decision on whatever our business is. So for an example, we're going to have a carbon tax in Ireland. Go figure out what our total emissions are in Ireland right now, and then do an NPV on what that's going to be over the next 10 years based on a high, medium, low scenario for what carbon tax pricing can be. Come back and bring me that on Friday and give me a write-up on what that's going to mean. That's a day in the life. And that's about as, at a place like Amazon, that's about as much direction as you're going to get, which is terrifying, especially when you're an undergraduate and you first have to go do that stuff. But that's kind of a day in the life for financial and policy analysts. The second part of the question, I think, was, Ellen, like, what's most exciting? What do you do in your job today? I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world, frankly, because I have my dream job. When I started in energy at Amazon, and I was one person. I was asked if I wanted to do the ambiguous job of coming up with an energy strategy for Amazon, which was the entire company at that point. Now, 10 years later, I have 177 people on my team. We're global. I've got staff in Singapore, Ireland, South America, all around the world. I've had just incredibly rich experiences that all started, frankly, from the UW economics department, taking a chance on me. People like the visiting committee taking the time, investing in me to post these type of events. So I'm so grateful. And one of the things that's really exciting is that my job is always different. Sometimes it's like pure economics. Other times I will be flying to Ireland to go meet with the Prime Minister to talk about energy constraints and how they're going to meet their 2030 renewable energy standards. And then other times I'm meeting with our Treasury department to talk about issuing green bonds. So much fun. I never get bored. And that's what I would encourage you guys to look for in your future careers, because I feel like I'm living the dream. The other thing I would do is when I come to these events, I feel kind of crazy because it doesn't seem that long ago. I graduated in 2006. I had a non-traditional path. I'm going to be 42 this month, but I'm like, wow, I would have looked at myself a long time ago and been like, wow, that person's like this big business person who travels around the world. When I was an undergraduate, I didn't even have a passport. So I'd have been like, what the heck? Pay it forward. I love coming back and talking to the econ department. I do a lot of this with the business school as well. Cary and Adley are here doing that right now. When you guys 10, 15 years from now do the same thing, that's part of it. Is it's a learning community. It's not just you guys as undergraduates and faculty. It's all of us participating. So I always have to say that whenever I go to any of these type of events. So.
Adley or Cary, did you want to add anything about what excites you about your jobs or anything?
Well, if you're hiring that Ireland problem sounds fun and interesting. And yeah, ambiguous. I mean, it's those types of problems, and I think it's working with the team is, the people at Pitchbook are so much fun, and the reason why I love, and why I'm still there is it's just there's also a never-ending series of hard problems that you're trying to solve in different respects, and it's just getting to work with those people. And I think that can get lost when you're trying to hire a job and start a career, or trying to get hired at a job and start a career. It's really just about the people. Certainly the work is important and making sure you're lined up for it, but it's about the people. The people sitting there interviewing you are the people you're gonna have to work with every day. You might have to report to. So be thinking about that as you're talking with them. And as you join the business, be a good person within that business, and then ultimately, certainly, pay it back where it has. And I get as much enjoyment out of these types of sessions as some of the greatest times at work. So I'd say having that opportunity is certainly part of it.
So I'll just add that I think what makes my job that I've had in my career that has been the most exciting is that in just always having or feeling like I have more to learn. And again, I'm kind of pumping up the consulting as a career path perspective. In a lot of cases, people come into consulting. In a sense, they may not know anything about the particular company, and I mean as a new person, you have to learn it. And one of the great things about being a consultant and being a very good consultant is that you really need to think like your client, and you really need to think about the client's business. You need to think about what they're trying to accomplish. And so when you look along those lines and you're constantly given opportunities on projects and various initiatives to work on, it's important to just sort of look beyond just the immediate task, that you need to do, what's on your project plan, to sort of what's the objective that the team or the company in this case is trying to do. And I think when you get to that point and when you think along those lines, it becomes so much more enriching. And that's where I sort of feel like in the 30 odd years and things, is that I always feel like there's been better experiences than other, but I always felt like as I went from one thing to the other, there was always something that was a challenge to solve, a new thing. It wasn't repetitive at all. And I think the consulting as a career kind of serves that purpose a lot, because many, particularly the sort of the big 4 or 5 consulting companies, it is a very much of an up or out culture. So in a lot of positions, you don't have the opportunity to do that for the same thing for 10 years. I mean, if you do, you're in the wrong industry, a wrong type of role. So you really need to sort of build your skills, understand it, and then move on. And so it does get a little bit scary because you think about, oh, what is that next step? But usually, especially if you're doing good work and your results are valued by your client and your own team, then those opportunities will be there. And so I've been fortunate to have a career that's chock full of that across 2 companies where I feel like there's always that that one more thing to learn about to do my job.
Thank you, guys. We just have a few more minutes here. So anyone else on the call, if you guys have a question, you're free to ask it at this time. So jump on in, anyone. I also have some pre-prepared questions if we want to do that.
Come on, what else is on your minds, folks? There must be a surprising question that you're dying to ask. We're dying to answer.
No holds barred.
Okay, I have a question. Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I guess my question is, did any of you guys feel that spark when you go into your first job? Did you realize, oh, this is the right one for me? Or how much of a consideration or I guess thought or doubt you kind of come up with or run into when you go into that situation where you don't feel as passionate or like maybe things are not as correct as you thought it would be? And I just want to see how you guys are handling that or handle that.
So I'll take a swing at it, but I'll let hopefully Nat and Adley will have other and probably better answers. I'll answer it 2 ways. So one is if you're talking about it for the first time, right? Because there's only that first time that you're starting your first job out of college and getting the opportunity. And if you're feeling at that point that, wow, I don't know if this is the right place for me, then maybe there's something in your process of figuring out where you're going to land that went a little bit south. So hopefully you're just excited. I guess my point is you're going to be excited. And I'd be very surprised if you're not. And you'll find motivation, nothing else, because you're probably scared like, bleep, because it's like, oh my God, what do I do? Right. So that sort of feeling will sort of will energize you. But I'll answer it a second way because, you also look at it as, you're again on the path of a career. It's like, you're going to have many situations where you're going to come into, so in my case, it might be a new client, might be a new, part of, the organization that I work for as a consulting organization, a new role with new teams and things. So always those new situations. And, I think if you prepare enough, so I think that the key point is just making sure you really think about, what you're getting yourself into and understand the circumstance and situation. The business context, again, is so important. And, come prepared, right? To you'll have a role in that discussion or that project, but there'll be probably a lot of things that are still being decided. So it's important for you to just kind of try to understand the situation, be willing to ask those questions that help you sort of piece together more easily. And especially as a newbie, it's the best time to be able to ask about what's going on just when you're a new person on. So people are willing to sort of explain those things. So take that opportunity.
Thanks.
Yeah, I real quick, I did, and then there was a nice honeymoon period, and then it quickly went away. I feel like you're asking if there's first love or true love, love at first sight, or what. You probably will. I mean, you'll be all jazzed up when you first join the company, and then you're gonna realize that it's work. Like there's a reason it's called work, and you collect a paycheck for what you do is because most of what you're doing is actually work. It's not your enjoyment. It's not what you're doing on the weekends for fun. So there'll be a grind period, and then you'll kind of, I think, come out of that valley and understanding, a little bit more about what that work is turning into, the people you work with, what the team's trying to achieve, and get a better sense. So I would encourage anyone, know that you'll go through a honeymoon period, you'll go through a valley of despair, and you'll emerge on the other side. And it might still not be the right place, then go somewhere else. Life's too short to, waste your time grinding under a bad boss and a bad situation. But it's also just it's not going to be love at first sight throughout the whole job, and that you've got work in front of you, you got to do. And then my last little secret I'll give you all is write a thank you letter after your interview. So few people do. And you can immediately separate yourself from probably 90% or more of the other applicants. I know it's shocking, but that is how few people actually write thank you letters, especially good ones that sort of like really show that you were listening through the interview, why you'd be interested. It's sort of, I think of it as the cover letter is the first thing you want someone to read. That thank you letter is the last thing. It's the last page of the book. It's your chance to really cement anything that you think makes you stick out or is unique, or just sort of continue to hammer home a point from that interview. So write a follow-up, just do an email, don't do it by hand, try to get it by the end of the day, because hiring decisions happen quickly. But it will go a long ways, I promise you that.
All right, well, it looks like we are at time here. So thank you once again to all of our
Hey, Ellen.
panelists. Yeah.
I was going to say there is one question on the chat, so I
Oh,
know
yeah.
we're running a little bit of time, but maybe we can just
Oh,
quickly
yeah.
answer that. And I'll start. So this is the question about pros and cons of grad school in economics, MS and PhD. And I'll start with the personal experience. So sounds like Nat, you had that seminal conversation with Fahad. I had more than a conversation. I had a dialogue extending for quite a while where I had two paths. And of course, I took the path to join a consulting organization. My other path was I'd been accepted to the PhD program at Cal Berkeley. And Professor Ternovsky, Michelle, who's both of them are still at the UW, but she was my advocate champion, the person that's really kind of encouraging me along. And I remember that day when I had to tell her, I'm decided to do some work first. And I think she will forever sort of feel a tinge of disappointment on that. But so that's the personal story. But I would say, just to close on that part, is I do sometimes think about what that would have been. I think my life would have been very different, but I am very happy with where I ended up. So I find that I don't think often about that, but occasionally it'll come up sometimes in these types of conversations. I think the pros and cons very simply for me that I would suggest is it's really a matter of sort of what you feel you want to do at this point. Because if you've been at school for 4 years and you're just the thought of doing more school, period, regardless of what type, is waning, I think it's time to get some work experience. But if you find there's something that is very passionate and your work is and thought education wise in college is not done, keep going, and you really want to do that, by all means do that. So that would be my advice point.
You guys already know my view, but I'm so impressed with Cary's story. I didn't know that, and it's really cool. Plus, I would have never got into a school as good as he did, so he had to really make the call.
I think I never saw Michelle's letter. She must have written something really good.
Well, thank you guys. We're after time. If anyone had any really quick last minute questions, assuming our panelists are fine waiting for that. But thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. I guess we'll wait a couple seconds here, but.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.